Hello and welcome back to the Cloister. In today's episode, the first of our Advent series, which will be released every week during Advent, Father Luke Macnamara from Glenstill Abbey shares on the promise of Advent. These wonderful talks were originally given at Glenstill Abbey back in 22, but the heart behind them and the message still remained as relevant today as it was then. As well as weekly episodes here on the Cloister, we have another podcast simply entitled Advent 2025. On this podcast, there are daily Lectio Divina readings to help you enter more into the season of Advent. You can find that simply by searching Advent 2025 wherever you get your podcasts. May these reflections be a blessing to you as we begin the wonderful season of Advent.
So I would like to begin with today's talk, which is the promise of Advent. And I suppose the first thing we would say, all of us, is that Advent is a much overlooked season. And it is a great pity, because it holds great promise for me, for you, for our neighbours, and for the world. But they are not as obvious as one might think. The reasons that we neglect Advent. The most obvious, of course, is that there's the razzmatazz associated with Christmas, which threatens to consume our every waking thought. And if we look elsewhere, we are brought back on message by the unremitting advertising, the decorations, the lighting, and even for Christmas, even for us Christians, this neglect is a real possibility. And why? Because within the liturgical year, there are two great feasts, but one of them, Christmas, is a real high point. Only Easter ranks ahead, and so the liturgical draw of Christmas tends to overshadow the period of preparation. So it's perhaps useful for us at the outset to compare Easter and Christmas. Easter is prepared by a 6-week season of 40 days, whereas Christmas has only a 4-week season, namely Advent. Christmas Day is followed by the Christmas season, which lasts only 2 or 3 weeks, whereas Easter Sunday is followed by the Easter season of 7 weeks or 50 days. The eclipsing of Advent by Christmas is therefore a risk even for many active Christians. I'll just take a pause here to invite the people that have come late to go to the far side of the building where they will find chairs and they can bring them over for themselves to sit down. Thank you. So, Christmas and Easter commemorate the two principal events in our salvation history. Christmas marks the birth of Christ, which, when we celebrate, is taking flesh and becoming one of us. And the technical name for this is the Incarnation. That's Christmas, the Incarnation, Christ taking flesh among us, becoming one of us. And the corollary is Easter, which marks the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus, which brings about our salvation, defeating sin and death, and opening to us eternal life. Theologically, the events at Easter are known as the Paschal Mystery. But if we did not have an incarnation, we would not have a Paschal Mystery. Christ has to take flesh, come among us, be one of us, to suffer, die, and rise again. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. So the Incarnation and the Paschal Mystery are closely bound, and it is fitting that there be a season of preparation for the celebration of the Incarnation, because it is the beginning of the whole story of our salvation. It's interesting to look at the history of Advent and how it has been celebrated through the ages, and it's rather complicated. And much of the complication is due to us. Well, I speak of us in Ireland, us Irish, us Celts, because we developed one particular strand of Advent and its celebration. We emphasised very much the penitential practice of Advent, preparing with penance and penitential practices for the coming of the Lord. And this is why we have purple vestments in church during Advent. The Celts are responsible, and some of us also, the Irish and the other Celts in Europe, were responsible for this purple colour. Now, there are reasons for this, and one of them is very beautiful. Christmas was one of the high points of the year for people to be baptised. And people before baptism had to practice prayer, fasting and abstinence. And the penitential practices that the baptised had to go through, they were adults at the time, it was adult baptism. The community would join in those penitential practices and support their brothers and sisters preparing for baptism by sharing in the penitential practices. So there was a very communitarian pastoral reason, which I think echoes something of the Irish spirit, that we support those who need a helping hand. And so that is the Irish tradition that of Advent and the Celtic tradition, the broader Celtic tradition. But there is another tradition which is continental, and particularly the north of Italy, where it arose, and it was a much shorter Advent. The Irish Advent used to be 6 weeks, full 6 weeks of penance and preparation for Christmas. The North Italy one was only 3 weeks, and it was one of joy, and very much an emphasis on the joyful anticipation of the coming of Christ. And we have that in the hymns and the chants that we have at this time of year. So there is this contrast between the penitential and the joyful, because we have two traditions merged in the church together. And the church is big enough to absorb both the Celtic and the continental, the joyful continental traditions of Advent, and kind of brought them into a synthesis. We don't have the 3 week of the North Italy model. We don't have the 6 week of the Celts. We have 4 weeks. We have the penitential colour of the vestments, but we have this joyful character then of the season. So you can see how, in a sense, ecumenical and Catholic the church is in its embracing of the different traditions. One of the problems with Advent is that it's a mathematical conundrum. One of the first things is that the church's New Year is never celebrated on January 1st. Instead, it is celebrated on the first Sunday of Advent, which can range from the 27th of November to the 3rd of December. And this year we have the longest possible Advent because Christmas falls on a Sunday. So there's 4 full weeks prior to Christmas. And that's a blessing. I feel we get shortchanged when Christmas is on a Monday and we only have 3 weeks and 1 day to prepare in those years. So we can go from having an Advent of just 22 days or the full 28 days that we have this year, which I prefer. And one of the reasons is that the liturgy really is very rich at this time of year. There are wonderful chants in the liturgy, wonderful hymns and so on that prepare us for the coming of the Lord. And if we look at the readings and the prayers from the last 5 weeks of the church's year, from about week 29 to Christ the King that we had just last week, we're gradually looking towards the final end of time and the coming of Christ at the end of time. That's what comes in towards the end of the church's year. And there isn't really much of a change when we come to the beginning of Advent. we're still looking towards the coming of Christ at the end of time, the so-called second coming. So the second coming of Christ. And we've been looking at that already at the end of the church's year, and now we're looking at the beginning. And this continuity is perhaps emphasized more, or the second coming is emphasized more at the beginning of Advent. And one might ask oneself, why? And I think the purpose is to train us to become expectant, to train us to await the coming of Christ. Because Christ, the second coming, hasn't happened yet. And there is a real risk for us when we celebrate Christmas that it will be a Groundhog Day. Many of us here have lived through maybe 20, 30, 40, maybe more Christmases. And therefore, how can we generate enthusiasm for welcoming Christ yet again? And if we actually take on board the practice of the first weeks of Advent, where we're looking forward to the second coming, our sense of expectation is fine-tuned. We are expecting the one who is yet to come, who is going to come imminently. So when we do change in the second part of Advent, in the final week, the final countdown to the coming of Jesus, then we're in a different space. We're not seeing this Christmas as yet another Christmas, like the 30, 20 or 10 we've had before, but as Christ coming anew to us. And that's the way it should be. Christ should come to us every Christmas, not simply 2,000 years ago in Bethlehem, but he should be coming to us in 2022, and please God, in 2023, and so on. That is as it should be. There is a special countdown in the last week towards Christmas, the last 7 days, and the shift very much focuses on the coming of Christ at Christmas. And we have a series of chants in the Abbey here where we sing the O antiphons, and there's a kind of a play on the letters that begin the O antiphons. The first letter of each antiphon doesn't seem to make much sense, but when you put them together and read them backwards, and of course you can only read them backwards on Christmas Eve, because then all the first letters are filled, it reads a Latin sentence, ero cras, I will be here tomorrow. So it's in a sense, what that says to me is that, in a sense, Advent is like a jigsaw for every one of us. We are given to see every day in the liturgy of Advent, in the readings, in the prayers, we're given a glimpse of the coming of Christ. And every day we get another piece of the jigsaw, and everybody is going to make a different jigsaw from those pieces. But in that way, Christ will come to each of you afresh with your jigsaw. And the next year, your jigsaw is going to be different. And so on. So it is expressive of our living relationship with Christ, that Christ comes to us afresh with new things to say to us, with new things to speak to us, with new words to maybe console us, to encourage us, to admonish us. So Christmas doesn't have to be a Groundhog Day. The practices of Advent are an antidote to this. An antidote reverses a drug that is harmful. So the negative effect of seeing Christmas as yet another Christmas, and there's all the things that people talk about, the family reunions, the work parties, and all the other things that they have to face that sometimes they don't want to face. But those are really secondary to the coming of Christ into our lives. with that reactivated sense of expectation. Now, we are given to fill this jigsaw, this portrait of Christ coming to us each year. We are given elements to help us build this jigsaw. We are given the readings, we are given the prayers, and we're given the chants. And one of the privileged books is the book of Isaiah, the prophetic book of Isaiah, and another book that is privileged in year C, which we don't have this year, is Zephaniah. So I like Zephaniah because most people forget about Zephaniah, but this year I'm constrained to talk about Isaiah, who I also like. So Isaiah is really well known to people. And people might say, I don't know Isaiah at all. But if you unpack phrases from Isaiah, they have crept into our language because Isaiah is full of poetry. And without knowing it, people who say they aren't religious or have no connection with the faith in Ireland, many of them will quote sentences from the gospel at times, like the salt of the earth and so on. But similarly, they will quote Isaiah without knowing it. So it has permeated our kind of thinking. And so that poetry has a way of getting through beyond the rational. It can kind of seep through the barriers of the mathematics and so on, and seep into who we are. And one of the ways that Isaiah will speak of this, and it's really beautiful, is in Isaiah 55. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven, and do not return there until they have watered the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower, and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and succeed in the thing for which I sent it. The word of the Lord comes as abundantly as the rain has fallen here in Limerick this afternoon, and it will not return to the Lord without having brought about growth and transformation of those who hear it. And this poetic language is maybe less evocative for us in Ireland, where rain is relatively plentiful. But in the Holy Land, when the autumn rains arrive, the Judean desert, which abuts Jerusalem, is transformed into grassy pastures and beautiful flowers. It becomes a paradise overnight, within a few days of the rains coming. And how many of people in the world at the moment regard their lives as desolate as the desert? And this is the radical transformation which the word of the Lord can bring about, that seeps down into the earth. The word will come as sure as the rain. But will our desert spaces receive the word, let it sink in, and cause the treasured seeds that the Lord has sown in us to germinate and bear fruit? And this is important to reflect upon. The rains that come into the Judean desert produce grass and beautiful flowers, but there's something in the earth that the water connects with, the seeds. And those seeds have been planted in each of us. We all have seeds given to us by God. We have been gifted as to be children of God. And God's word, meeting those seeds, germinates and transforms and gives life and gives beauty and gives joy. And even new life. So even old people at the end of life who have very few days left can have these transformative moments, or even younger people may have these transformative moments. And I remember being with a young mother who was dying, and her two boys were at either side at her bedside. And I called to visit her, and she hadn't the strength to pray. But her two sons, one on either side, held up her hands so that she could pray the Our Father. She always did. That next morning she had the strength to go home and was able to die at home 2 days later. But the extraordinary transformation that came about from that was quite extraordinary. So the seeds that are within us that can be germinated by the word of the Lord, that transformative word, the seeds are there in all of us. Sadly, not all of them access the water, don't access the ability to produce flowers and fruit. There is a special time of opportunity for this transformative word that God sends us. And there is a verse from Isaiah that reappears in the prayers, chants, and hymns of Advent. Shower, O heavens from above, and let the skies rain down righteousness. Let the earth open, that salvation may spring up, and let it cause righteousness to sprout up. I, the Lord, have created it. What I'd like you to notice here is that here we have a command. Shower, rain down. Isaiah invites us to ask God to rain down his gifts upon us so that we might receive their transformative power and that salvation might spring up through us and in us. It is a daring command, but it is one we make again and again during the season of Advent. And here at Glenstall, we sing this chant with its direct command to God almost daily in Advent. Rorate celi de super et nubes pluant justum. Shower, O heavens, from above, and let the skies rain down righteousness. Through this command, we are anticipating the gifts that will accompany the Christ at his coming. While waiting for this future coming, we already seek the associated gifts, the gifts that come with him, so that we and the world that so clearly resembles a desert in so many ways may be transformed into a place of salvation for all. The first reading we had this morning in this year's cycle of readings comes from Isaiah 2, 1-5, and it truly sets the scene for the season of Advent. The vision of Isaiah, son of Amos, concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In the days to come, the mountain of the temple of the Lord shall tower above the mountains, and be lifted higher than the hills. All the nations will stream to it. Peoples without number will come to it, and they will say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths. Since the law will go out from Zion, and the oracle of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will wield authority over the nations, and adjudicate between many peoples. These will hammer their swords into plowshares, their spears into sickles. Nation will not lift sword against nation. There will be no more training for war. O house of Jacob, come. Let us walk in the light of the Lord. There is a play here on Hebrew names that many people miss today. The name Isaiah signifies salvation of the Lord, while Amos signifies strong or mighty, again associated with the salvation of the Lord. With a mighty hand, the Lord delivers the people from Egypt, and so on. Both names are associated with priestly characters in the Bible, and a vision associated with this genealogy, Isaiah, son of Amos, suggests a divine revelation pointing to a salvific intervention of the Lord. Given that Isaiah's visions form much of the cycle of Advent readings, it is good to keep in mind the underlying thrust indicated by his name and lineage. For most people today, visions involve only one sense. When we think of visions, we think of just seeing. But for the ancients, and for Isaiah, visions involve all the senses, but especially the senses of sight and hearing. And Isaiah engages the hearer of this vision imaginatively through all 5 senses. And this multi-sensory imaginative experience of the hearers transforms an absence into a presence. The first thing to be noted in this reading is the geography. The mountain of the temple of the Lord shall tower above the mountains and be lifted higher than the hills. Now Mount Zion, or the site of the temple in Jerusalem, is raised up on the Judean hills, but it is itself surrounded by a circle of hills, like the centre, being in the centrepiece of a saucer. It's surrounded by an elevated rim. But in this case, Mount Zion will be towering above all the surrounding hills and all the surrounding mountains of Bashan and Edom, which are 2 and 3 times higher than the Judean hill land on the far side of the River Jordan and within easy sight of Jerusalem. So what Isaiah envisages is nothing less than a transformed landscape, where the mountain of the temple of the Lord will tower above all the other hills and all the great mountains. Isaiah will later speak of a new heavens and a new earth, the centre of which he now reveals almost at the beginning of his prophecy, which is the mount of the temple of the Lord. And the mount isn't simply a geographical centre, but it is the centre for the entire peoples of the world. Innumerable people from all nations will go up this mountain. The world's population unites in journeying to the temple of the Lord in the New Jerusalem. The gathering of people from north, east, south and west in every parish church is a symbolic anticipation of this future gathering. So every time a community gathers at a parish church, they needn't be everybody, but some from north, south, east and west. They are in a sense anticipating this eschatological gathering where the people come to meet the Christ who is coming to us. And it's important to emphasize this because in COVID we weren't able to do this, but now we are. The value of coming together, of journeying together. And Isaiah emphasizes this because he gives us a bird's eye view of the people streaming up the mountain of the Lord. But he also brings us close. He doesn't want us to be at a bird's eye view. He brings us close because we can hear them as they sing, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord." So it underlines the importance of a physical gathering of people, journeying together, supporting each other, each believer within a community of believers. The Lord gives us companions on our way who support us as we support them in our journey together with the Lord. But the focus remains on the Lord. The people are motivated by a desire to learn from the Lord. The teaching of the Lord is translated as law in our translations and as Torah in Hebrew, the word given to the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, and considered the most holy part of the Bible by Jews. This Torah is God's gift to his people at Sinai through Moses. It's important to note that this instruction is given only after God has delivered his people from slavery and death in Egypt and led them through the Red Sea. The instruction is given in a context of a relationship, one where God saves the people and wishes the people to become his people and have fullness of life. The instruction is given not to enslave the people, they've just been freed from slavery in Egypt, but for the people to live freely in a life-giving relationship with God. So the purpose of the Torah is to allow people, to enable people to stay in this life-giving relationship with God. And the new Torah will go forth from Zion, the mount of the temple, and it will be accessible not simply to the people in the desert, the Israelites in the desert, but to all nations, all the people of the world. The Hebrew root of Torah recurs in this passage, where in a wordplay, Isaiah states that the Lord will teach them his ways, so that they may walk in his paths. The Torah is the content of the teaching that the Lord teaches the people. So the Lord is teaching with teaching. It's kind of emphasized here. And the instruction, though, and this is important, it's not to remain in the head, but it is to transform the lives of the people. They are to walk in the paths of the Lord, not to think in the paths of the Lord, but to walk in the paths of the Lord. And this evokes the Hebrew term for the individual laws of the Torah, the halakha, the way on which one walks. So it emphasizes the practical nature of the teaching, which involves a response of love and affection, but one that is expressed not only in words, but also in actions. If a man says to his wife, "I love you, my dear," she might say, "Show me." And it's reasonable to show love in action. The people are invited to choose daily the way or path of the Lord, confident that it is the way that leads to life. The Lord will be judge of all peoples and nations, but he's a judge that seeks life. And if I allude just briefly to the purpose of judgment, the judgment is very clearly qualified in Isaiah at several points. God does not judge according to appearances, does not judge according to hearsay. So there's a profound judgment that seeks life, that is looking for the seeds that are buried in each of us, to see, can they somehow germinate? See what conditions might be needed for them to germinate. And they're there in each of us. The goal of this judgment is that universal peace be established. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither will they learn war any more. And how we need to hear these words this Advent, when so many on our continent face the horrors and effects of war every day, and we see the migrants coming to our shores all over Europe and beyond, particularly in the Ukraine, but also in Syria and elsewhere in the Middle East. And in Nigeria, we see terrible war and oppression happening in many, many countries. May the Lord's shout for peace be heard and heeded. The vision speaks of swords being hammered into plowshares and spears into sickles. There is a transformation of metal that was formerly used for the weapons of war, which bring about death and destruction, into agricultural tools, which provide food and life. The grain deal between Ukraine and Russia is a sign of hope that peace may come. It's interesting to note here, though, that the same metal that was used for weapons is reused for agricultural tools. The people have lost nothing. Everything is conserved. The same metal is used. The words recall those of Matthew, "Even the hairs of your head are all numbered by the Father." This is a great cause of hope, that even those who have used their energy and personal resources for war may yet be changed and use that same energy for peace. So don't empty the tank. Don't throw away your capacities and abilities that you may have used for wrong, but repurpose them. Allow them be transformed in the furnace. Allow them to be remodeled. One might think of what Jesus speaks about in the Gospels, the hardened hearts. Christ doesn't want us to lose our hearts. He just wants them to be softened, to be made soft and supple, that they might beat and know love and share love. How might this happen? It's a tall order, you might say. We are resistant. Metal is resistant to being reshaped. Hammering alone is not enough. You'll simply break the metal. It's not enough to transform metal from weapons to tools. We require a furnace to smelt the metal that it might be recast. And the prophet Isaiah speaks of the presence of the Lord over the mountain of the temple as a pillar of fire, much as the presence of the Lord took this form in the desert wanderings. And I quote, "Then the Lord will create over the whole site of Mount Zion and over its places of assembly a cloud by day and smoke and the shining of a flaming fire by night." The people who respond to the Lord's call will both receive his teaching and have the flaming fire of the Lord's presence to smelt down the metal and transform their weapons into agricultural tools. By following the instructions of the Lord, people walk in his ways and have the presence of the divine fire alongside them, as those in the desert, to continually transform the weapons into tools for good. The instructions of the Lord are available to all peoples who may freely come to the temple of the Lord and receive the gift of divine instruction that leads to life. There is also, of course, the Spirit, which is associated with fire. And this Spirit is especially associated with the shoot that will spring from the stump of Jesse, a stump which is dead, nothing is visible, there's no growth, and yet this shoot springs up, a sign of hope. Jesse is the father of King David, and this prophecy foresees a future Davidic descendant for Israel. This descendant will be endowed with the Spirit of the Lord, with its multiple gifts: wisdom, understanding, counsel, strength, knowledge, and fear of the Lord. The Spirit is the fire of the divine presence that comes into the world with the Lord's anointed, and which will be available to all on the mountain of the Lord's holy temple. This is the fire which no metal can resist. The hardest metal is moulded and softened and refashioned in accord with the design of the Spirit of the Lord. The divine furnace is often seen simply as a place of judgment, but with Isaiah we may see it as the workshop where the creative Spirit remodels us for life. St. Benedict, in his rule in chapter 4, speaks much the same way in his Tools of Good Works, how we repurpose our energies for doing good, walking in the ways of the Lord, and how that transforms the heart. There is going to be a new heavens and a new earth. And if there's going to be a new heavens and a new earth, we require to adapt to the life that it will have. Things will not be as they are now. There will be no more war. So if we're armed to the teeth with weapons, they're going to be redundant. And Isaiah will speak of the characteristics of the peaceful kingdom on God's mountain. The wolf shall lie with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together. And the lion shall eat straw like the ox, the nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put its hand on the adder's den. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. The vision is a return to our existence in the Garden of Eden, where no animals were slaughtered, and humans and animals alike ate the produce of the land. The vision is a promise of the universal extent of the Lord's peace, even among the animals and between animals and humankind. The reason for this peace is that the knowledge of the Lord fills the earth as the waters fill the oceans of the sea. This knowledge is the fruit of the multifaceted Spirit of the Lord and the teachings of the Lord that emanate from the Lord's temple. It is no accident that the location of this peaceful kingdom is the Lord's holy mountain, the location of his temple, and therefore of his Spirit and his teaching. Isaiah's vision is one of promise. It heralds the future coming of the Lord's anointed and the associated transformation of the earth and all who live in it. The values of today's earth are upended. War and violence have no place. Only peace and righteousness. The coming of the Lord will change everything and everyone. This is a sign of promise to us that institutional forms of oppression and violence, the power of empires and money, will be overturned. Isaiah chimes with Advent's purpose as a season of righteousness, of justice and peace, functioning as a beacon to Christians and beyond, to all peoples, that our hope is not limited to this finite world, but is for the new transformed world of universal peace and joy. This hope for the future coming of the Lord's anointed and the new heavens and the new earth is one that should orientate our thoughts, desires and actions in the here and now. If we know where we're going to, that influences how we journey. It influences the road we take. It influences what we take for the journey. And so if our destination is to be this land of righteousness, justice and peace, then envy, greed and all those things get cast aside, and love and faith and hope reside in us more and more as we journey closer and closer to the Lord's holy mountain. So that vision kind of refines our attitudes, our thoughts, our actions, our words. By attuning to this Advent hope, we no longer live on the chimeras of power, wealth, privilege, or transient beauty. Instead, we shape our lives in accordance with this hope and draw upon the life-giving teachings of the Lord made available to us already in Jesus Christ, letting that word reach the seeds within us to germinate and to blossom and to flower. The letter to the Romans reads today, commanding us to wake up, since the time is almost here. And many of my brothers have echoes of this reading after this morning at the morning office. There was a few sleepy heads, and it certainly resonated very readily in the choir when we heard it. But there is an immediacy to this call. The coming of the Lord is not to be missed, and our preparation should start now. You might be daunted by this, but we are given the help of the Spirit, the teachings of the Lord, and St. Paul reminds us that Christ himself will be our armour for the struggles ahead. We are protected by Christ through the world of injustice and oppression of the actual here and now. Through that we are protected. Christ is our armour. St. Paul compares the time of waiting and the time of Christ's coming to the time of night and day. The coming of Christ is associated with the dawning of the day, and Christ will later in Advent be hailed as the new dawn, the light that never sets. This antiphon will be sung on the winter solstice, the day when the sun is at its lowest in the northern hemisphere. O Oriens, we say in Latin, and in English, O morning star, splendour of light eternal and sun of righteousness, come and enlighten those who dwell in darkness and the shadow of death. The antiphon notes that the new dawn is an eternal light. The seeming victory of darkness is unmasked. although we are living in darkness and the shadow of death, the light will dawn for us. Our hope is sure. There is one pressing task for us, and that is that we abandon the habits of darkness and embrace those of the light, that we might the more readily welcome the light when it comes. The Gospel today comes from Matthew, but it brings us back to the stories of our origins in Genesis. Matthew speaks of the days of Noah and the flood. The created world has gone from bad to worse since the sin of Adam and Eve, the murder of Abel, and the ever-growing evil and violence of the populace. The persistent evil provoked the Lord to engineer the flood, to be rid of this population and start again. But the righteous Noah was to be spared. Strikingly, though, Matthew deviates from Genesis' presentation of the situation. For Matthew, there was no obvious evil among the people. They were simply eating, drinking, taking wives, taking husbands, when the flood came and swept all away. When the Son of Man comes, people will be at their regular occupations. Matthew gives example of men working in the fields, women milling grain, typical occupations for the time. The Son of Man comes to the world in the everyday ordinariness of our lives and will meet us at our daily occupations and activities. We often think of high points in life, but Matthew reminds us that the Son of Man will come in an everyday situation. And this sharpens the effect of the quotation from Genesis. While great sin occasioned God's flood and renewal of the world in Noah's time, in our time, the new heavens and earth will come to us as we are in our everyday life. While St. Paul commands us to wake up as the eternal day is dawning, Matthew commands us to stay awake and stand ready for the Son of Man, since he will come at an hour we do not expect. These readings and this Gospel fit well the Advent theme of preparing for the coming of the Lord and maintaining that anticipating poise in stance and attitude. Isaiah points to the mountain of the Lord as a focal point for the gathering of all the people to hear the instruction of the Lord, which leads to life and tunes us to the peaceful kingdom that will accompany the coming of the Lord's anointed. The Lord attunes us through the gift of his teachings, his presence in the pillar of fire, his divine spirit, this attuning to his coming and his kingdom. So don't be daunted by this wonderful vision of a new heavens and a new earth. Christ knows the situation of the here and now. He knows the distance between this world and the transformed world. But Christ does not leave us without his word, without his spirit, without his consolation, and without his protection. The revelation of the future kingdom through the prophetic vision, which also encloses the speech of those ascending the mount of the temple of the Lord, functions as a beacon to direct our thoughts, our words, and our actions. So the vision of the temple, the mount of the temple of the Lord, and the people streaming, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord," where they receive the teaching, they receive the Spirit, and they enter into this peaceable kingdom. We anticipate that every time we gather on Sunday for Eucharist, when we come from east and west, north and south, to our parish church. And parish churches on Sundays can be beacons to their communities and to the world. And the world has need of such beacons of hope, beacons that point to the way the world should be, a world of justice and peace, and not one of hatred, enmity, and war. And while I've spoken of the war in Ukraine, of course, there's enmity in every community. And so having beacons in every community has a very strong value. And we don't have to do an opinion poll on how many come to church, but to have representatives from north, south, east, and west gathering in the one place forms the anticipatory sign, the beacon for all around. And in these post-COVID times, it is important that these beacons be lit again in Ireland and throughout Europe, and that we hear each other saying, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob," that we walk together to our places of worship, that we gather in our parish churches, and that we function as true and valid anticipations of the future unique temple, the one temple on the Lord's mountain to which we will all go. Our world has need of such beacons for the better world that will come with Christ. There is so much potential throughout the world, so many dormant seeds that have yet to hear the word to be set alight with the fire of the Spirit, that these beacons are necessary. And so part of our function in Advent and preparing for Advent is not only to prepare ourselves for the coming of Christ, but also to participate in the preparation of our families, parishes, and indeed beyond for the coming of Christ into the world and the promise that he brings.